Welcome everyone to AGI's GeoWebinar series. My name is Leila Gonzalez and I'll be moderating today's Geoscience Currents Discussion webinar. For today's Geoscience Currents discussion, I'm going to be discussing our recent currents, number 28, which is the K-12 teachers and geoscience degrees. And then after the presentation is over, again, we'll be doing some discussion with the webinar participants, again, through the type your questions in the question box, and then I will ask those questions and then go ahead and answer them. So to get started, just to give you a background on what some of the questions that we wanted to look at here for this geoscience currents, one of the main items we wanted to look at in this currents was the percentage of K-12 teachers who have their highest degree in the geosciences as compared to other science disciplines or other non-science disciplines. K-12 education provides an important formative stage in a student's education, and the coursework to which a student is exposed during this period has an impact on the choices they make in their selection of a college major, and that in turn influences to some degree what career paths they choose, as well as within the geosciences. If they don't have that education in K through 12, especially in high school, if they don't have exposure to geoscience disciplines there, then students are less likely to choose geosciences in college. So in this currents, we wanted to examine three main questions. The first being, what percentage of K through 12 teachers have geoscience degrees? And we wanted to look at that by grade level, so pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, elementary, and secondary school, as well as by degree level. And then we wanted to look at which geoscience subdisciplines are generally represented in those K through 12 teachers, and also to take a time snapshot look between 1993 and 2006 at these degree terms. So moving on here, we're first going to look at pre-kindergarten and kindergarten teachers, and then we'll look at elementary school teachers, and then we'll look at secondary school teachers. So to start with pre-K and K teachers, what we can see overall is we see this change in degree level through time. So we see this increase in master's degrees between 1993 and 2006, and decrease in the proportion of pre-K and K teachers with bachelor's degrees during this period. Doctoral degrees, again, very small percentage at 0.1%, almost none. That doesn't change over this time frame. So if we look at some of the raw numbers of teachers that have their degrees in these different fields, we can see those raw numbers here. Again, social and related sciences is the primary degree field for most pre-K and K teachers. We'll look at the percentages here, and we can see that geoscience degrees dropped from about 3% in 1993 to about 2% in 2006, where again social and related sciences and non-science and engineering fields have the highest proportion of, those are the disciplines that pre-K and K teachers tend to have their highest degrees in. Now if we look at within the geoscience subdisciplines, it's environmental science and studies and geography. Those two subdisciplines comprise the largest number of geoscience degrees for pre-K and K teachers. Earth science, geology, and geoscience other, as classified by this NSF data, only contributed to the 1993 data set, but there were no teachers in 2006 with their highest degrees in that subdiscipline. One other thing to note with this data is if you see here in 2006 the inclusion of a category called science and engineering related fields. This category includes health, science, and math, teacher education, and technology, and other S&E fields. So the inclusion of this degree category does account for some of the decline that we see in the other degree fields between the 1993 and 2006 timeframe, and that holds true for all of the all of the education levels through K through 12 that we'll be seeing in the graphs that are coming up next. So one of the other things I also wanted to look at here was if we looked at by degree field, what was the proportion of degree levels. So if we see here on the right, we can see this increase between 1993 and 2006 in the percentage of pre-K and K teachers with their highest degree in the geosciences that have bachelor's degrees. So basically in 93, we have a little over about 85% of those teachers with geoscience degrees had bachelor's degrees, and about, I would say 15% here had master's degrees, and you see that change. So that's what this slide is showing. And again, you can see non-science and engineering degrees having a pretty large proportion of master's degrees within that discipline for pre-K and K teachers. Now moving on, if we look at elementary school teachers, we can see here again a similar trend where you get a decrease in bachelor's degree holders over time and an increase in those with master's degrees. Also, we see a slight increase in those with doctorate degrees over this period. And this is for all elementary school teachers. Again, looking at the raw numbers, we see that social and related sciences and non-science and engineering degrees, those are the degree levels or the degree fields for most elementary school teachers. And geoscience degrees, again, make a small proportion of this cohort. Then if we look at the proportion of elementary school teachers by degree field, what we see here is you see this decline in geoscience degrees from 1.9% to 1%, and again we see this large proportion of teachers with social related sciences and non-science and engineering degrees. Again, this increase here in science and engineering related fields, which probably impacts all the other sciences pretty significantly, since science and math education is included in that S&E related field. Again, we see within the subdisciplines at this level for geoscience degrees, environmental science and studies and geography comprise the largest number of those elementary school teachers that have geoscience degrees. And also some of the other things to consider is that in 2006, we also see an inclusion of some of the other geoscience subdisciplines such as atmospheric science and meteorology and oceanography. Now, if we look at degree levels by degree field, we can see this decrease here for geoscience degrees, decrease in the proportion of elementary school teachers that have geoscience degrees. There's a decrease in the proportion that have bachelor's degrees and an increase in the proportion that have master's degrees, as well as some increase in doctorate degrees over this time. And those trends are a little different than what we see over here in some of the other sciences, where you see an increase in bachelor's degrees, proportion of bachelor's degrees for those degree fields, as well as a decrease in the percentage of those degree fields that have master's degrees. Now moving on to looking at secondary school teachers, again looking at the overall degree levels of computer, math, and science secondary school teachers across the board, we see that the proportion of teachers with bachelor's degrees remain relatively steady around 45%, but we see this decrease in master's degrees and slight increase in doctorate degrees over the 1993 to 2006 timeframe. And again, remember for these following slides that we're only looking at computer, math, and science secondary school teachers, not all teachers in secondary school like we did with elementary school and pre-K and kindergarten. Now, if we look at the raw numbers, what we see here is we see a large proportion of non-science and engineering degrees holders in 2006, as well as S&E related fields. Geosciences moved from about 6,000 to almost 12,500 teachers that had their highest degree in geosciences between 1993 and 2006. So if we look at the relative percentages, and again these percentages are the percentage of the total, so the total percentage of the total number of teachers in 1993, and the same calculations for 2006, we see again that non-science and engineering degrees comprise one of the largest proportions of degree holders for those teachers. Some of the other changes that are of note here is we can see, again, this decrease in degree discipline for many of the science fields, but again, that's related to that increase in science and engineering related fields. And also there's a decrease in those percentage of teachers that have geoscience degrees, so from 3.4% in 93 to 2.7% in 2006. And here, again, like similar to the other K through 12 levels, environmental science and studies and geography contribute the most to the geoscience degree holders. And in 1993, we also see the inclusion of earth, geology, and geoscience other degree holders in that cohort of geoscience degree holders for secondary school teachers that teach computer, math, or science. Looking at the proportion of degree level by degree field, we see some interesting trends. Overall, an increase in the proportion of bachelor's degrees, more or less a decrease in the proportion of master's degrees, and an increase in the proportion of doctorate degrees. And you can see how geoscience degrees stack up against the other disciplines here. And that's it for the data for today. If we have any questions, we can go ahead and start taking them at this point. So feel free to enter your questions into the question box, and I will go ahead and answer them as they come online.